Where we've seen a difference is in terms of total flows between the two. ETFs receiving more demand than mutual funds right now. This theme continues to carry out from last year, as ETFs continue to experience rapid growth as a convenient investment vehicle for investors. But in terms of AUM, even though ETFs are growing rapidly, the mutual fund market still occupies a total 1.9 trillion AUM in Canada.
Hello, and welcome to The Advantage Investor, a Raymond James Limited podcast, a podcast that provides perspective for Canadian investors who want to remain knowledgeable, informed, and focused on long-term success. We are recording this on August 14th, 2023. I'm Chris Cooksey from the Raymond James Corporate Communications and Marketing Department. Today, mutual fund and ETF specialist Luke Kahnert makes his first appearance on the podcast. Luke and I will be discussing trends in the industry and how investors are using mutual funds and ETFs to grow their investments. Welcome to The Advantage Investor, Luke. I hope you had a great weekend.
It was a great weekend. Thanks for having me, Chris.
Good to hear. Good to hear. Mutual fund and ETFs, of course, have been a part of portfolios that investors have used to grow and save their money for a long time now. So I'm looking forward to hearing what's new in the business and some of the trends. Does that sound good to you?
Absolutely. Happy to be here. Thanks again.
All right, let's jump in, man. Maybe we should start off with, why does one look at an ETF or mutual fund flow, or flows, I guess would be more appropriate?
Yeah, flows. It's a great question. By analyzing ETF flows and mutual fund flows, we can gain a better sense of market sentiment and further analyze, see which asset classes are currently popular and how investors are just positioning their investments, on a go-forward basis. So, for instance, to give you an example, this year back in March, we saw a ton of volatility in the financial services sector, given, Silicon Valley Bank, Credit Suisse, et cetera. What was really interesting was during the end of March, we saw some significant positive flows into financial sector ETFs, such as the equal weight Canadian banks ETFs that are out there, which just shows, that despite the volatility, investors were still saw the sector to be attractive, welcomed the idea of taking advantage of the volatility, and this is just one example of how analyzing flows can provide a better overall sense of investor sentiment.
Okay. Now, I used to work for one of the big bank mutual fund companies in the country, and monthly we'd get our email telling us our flows and the trends. And obviously, when things were going very well, there was a lot of positive flows, and then when things weren't as well, there might have been a net redemption or two in there. So maybe you can just go over what has happened in the first half of 2023 in terms of mutual fund and ETF flows.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. So it's a great question. Just taking a step back, if you look at the two investment vehicles between mutual funds and ETFs, during the first half of 2023, overall Canadian mutual funds reported around $13 billion of net redemptions. And this was driven primarily by net flows out of balance and equity-focused mutual fund categories, such as U.S. equity, to give you an example there. On the other hand, Canadian ETFs reported around $22 billion of net creations, with fixed income ETFs capturing around 12.5 billion of these flows. Between the two investment vehicles, mutual funds and ETFs were fairly aligned, with both fixed income categories leading the charge for both ETFs and mutual funds. Where we've seen a difference is in terms of total flows between the two. ETFs receiving more demand than mutual funds right now. This theme continues to carry out from last year, as ETFs continue to experience rapid growth as a convenient investment vehicle for investors. But in terms of AUM, even though ETFs are growing rapidly, the mutual fund market still occupies a total 1.9 trillion AUM in Canada versus ETFs of 360 billion. So the ETF marketplace still has some catch-up to do when compared to mutual funds on an AUM basis, but is growing quite rapidly, that's for sure.
Interesting. Now that's an interesting trend. So, maybe we could talk about some of the other trends you're seeing in this Canadian ETF space.
Sure, absolutely. So, to answer simply, we continue to see a growing trend in cash-like ETFs. It's not the most exciting asset class to talk about, but when you have such strong demand in cash-like ETFs, it really provides an indication of the cautious investor sentiment we're seeing in the market today. I was listening to your recent podcast with our head investment strategist, Neil Linsdell, discuss the R word, recession. And I believe that with the rise in interest rates combined with the continued uncertainty we see in the market environment, naturally we've seen investor demand in money market safe haven instruments, such as these money market ETFs. So they continue to rake in positive flows month over month. And it's not surprising. I mean, some of these ETFs are yielding more than 5%. So it makes sense we're seeing such strong demand here.
So people are basically parking their money on the sidelines because they're not confident. Either they're saving for something specifically short term, or they're not confident in the long term perspectives right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and even when you look past flows and just look at the ETF providers as well, we're seeing strong product development across the money market category within ETF specifically. So year to date, we have already seen 9 new money market ETFs launch. And this will include HISA ETFs, short-term T-bill ETFs, and just the traditional money market strategies that have always been around in the marketplace. So
right.
It appears to be, or I should say, there appears to be an investor appetite for different money market flavors, for lack of better words.
Okay. Now, you mentioned HISA, or high interest savings accounts. That product itself is not all that ancient when it comes to things. But my understanding is HISA ETFs are one of the more popular things you deal with at this stage of the game. So maybe just touch on some of the updates regarding that sort of structure within the ETF world.
Sure. Yeah, the HISA ETFs have been such a popular topic for the last year and a bit, I'd say. So, I mean, just to, I guess, explain to our listeners, a high interest savings ETF, HISA ETF, is like a savings account that trades on the stock market. So these products are basically savings accounts available in ETF form, and the assets are comprised of deposits of high interest savings accounts placed with Schedule I Canadian banks. Not to go too deep into the weeds here, but the yields will move in lockstep with the Bank of Canada's interest rate policy, and typically will provide a rate that is a bit higher than what you'd find in a standard savings account at a nearby bank branch.
Okay.
So, yeah, sorry to interrupt, but as a result of the rapid interest rate increases we've seen, this ETF structure received explosive demand throughout 2022, and we continue to see it in 2023.
All right. Now, in addition to these HISA ETFs, are there any other money market ETFs that are generating investor demand?
Sure. Yeah. And before I get into that, I should mention with HISA ETFs, recently the Office of the Superintendent of Financial Institutions, also known as OSFI, the regulator of the Canadian banks, announced the review of the liquidity adequacy requirements for high interest savings account ETFs, HISA ETFs. So an update is expected to be provided in the fall, whether or not OSFI determines that these deposits need to be reclassified. But anyways, to summarize, the review is still ongoing. And the results of this review might impact these ETF products after it's completed. But for any investors who are interested in further discussing the topic, I'd probably just say, I'd encourage them all to reach out to their Raymond James advisor.
Yeah, it makes sense. And obviously, like the reason why the regulators doing this is to make sure that if someone withdraws their money, there's actually money to hand over.
Exactly. And you know what? I'll say we're lucky in Canada that our industry is supported by a robust regulatory framework that is strong but also flexible. So right now, the ETF providers of HISA ETFs are working very closely with OSFI as they roll out this review. And I think this open structure is a key characteristic that allows our ETF industry to continue to innovate and grow as it's done in the past.
Great. All right, let's hit on some of those other money market ETF structures.
Sure. So, like I mentioned before, there's been 9 new money market ETFs launched this year. Some of these include traditional money market strategies available in an ETF vehicle. These would invest in a combination of T-bills, bankers' acceptances, commercial paper. Some are short-term T-bill ETFs that provide pure exposure to 0 to 3 month US and Canadian T-bills. In a nutshell, within the money market category, there will be some slight differences in exposure, providing an opportunity for investors to find a suitable money market strategy that fits their own exact risk profile. And if you look at the flows this is just an interesting stat. Just if you look at the month of July alone, there was nearly 3 billion that flowed into Canadian ETFs overall. When you dig deeper within that number, money market ETFs led flows with $875 million. So it's pretty significant when you think about it.
Like a third then, right? Is that
yeah, basically.
Wow. For an English major, Luke, that's good, man.
A third going into cash like ETFs. So cash is very attractive and has been has been in demand for with investors, and it's exciting again. Cash, yeah. Who knew? It's amazing what a few interest rate hikes can do, right? So,
probably for the first time in your career, cash is exciting, right? Because when you came out of school, it was all equity.
You know what? Yeah, exactly. It's been a while since we've seen rates as high for a lot of people, and it's certainly interesting to see when you look at ETFs and the flows. That is.
All right. Well, let's just finish off here then. As you mentioned, a lot of new ETFs have been launched in the category of money market. Maybe touch on the trends you're seeing in regards to these new product launches.
Perfect. Great question. Yeah, so I already mentioned the first theme is the money market and short-term fixed income category, given the accelerated path of rising interest rates. So that has been huge. Number two, though, the second theme that we're seeing is a rise in the covered call ETF space. These strategies provide investors a potential enhanced yield using an options-based strategy. And in general, they tend to outperform their underlying holdings in sideways markets when markets are volatile. And the covered call strategy is able to generate a higher yield in these sort of environments, I should say. They will typically underperform in periods of rising markets. Now, what I find interesting about these product launches in both money market and covered call ETFs is that I like to think that ETF providers are always trying to forecast, potential future investor needs. Down the road, who knows what sort of market environment is in store for us, but I'd imagine ETF providers are always thinking and they want to ensure that they have solutions readily available in all sorts of different environments. So on that note, the fact that we are currently seeing more money market ETFs and covered call ETFs launched this year rather than your traditional equity ETFs may be an indication as well that our Canadian ETF providers are more focused on having those defensive strategies ready on their suite of product on their product shelf, which is interesting to think that perhaps our partners, our ETF partners, want to make sure that they're focused more on the conservative and cautious, strategies available.
Just because of the environment that's going on right now, I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, who knows, right? Yeah.
Makes sense. Well, Luke, that's a lot of great information. Really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule for to meet with us and talk with us, and I hope you'll join us again.
Absolutely. Happy to join the call, Chris. Thanks so much for having me.
Reach out to us at the Advantage Investor pod at raymondjames.ca. Subscribe to the Advantage Investor on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Please contact your advisor with any questions you have. On behalf of Raymond James and the Advantage Investor, thank you for taking the time to listen today. Until next time, stay well.